Who watches The Watchmen? We watch The Watchmen. My name is Josh Rouillet. I'm here with Terry Schwartz and David Griffin.
Hello.
And we've watched HBO's new Watchmen series, a sequel series that is continuing on in the world of Watchmen. And we have some thoughts. We're going to full spoilers on the pilot, which we've all watched. And I'm going to start with you, Terry. What did you think?
What an episode. I liked it fine. I'm more excited to see where it goes from here than I was excited by this episode, but I'm intrigued in the whole still.
I think for me, I'm coming at this more as a Damon Lindelof fan than a Watchmen fan necessarily, and I love the leftovers we did with that world, so I'm intrigued by this new world that he's created. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I'm like, I want to see more of it, so please just give me more.
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't think it was the strongest start, but I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. It asks a lot of tough questions, yet I'm not entirely sure what all those questions are, but hopefully we'll get some answers.
And interestingly, when HBO was sending out screeners to review this in advance, they were actually asking all journalists who reviewed it to only review it once they'd seen the first 6 episodes, which I thought was kind of BS. I know that's very much Damon Lindelof's approach. He did the same with Leftovers, but for this case, we wanted to just watch the first episode, watch it how everyone else would. But I thought that was interesting for me that, like, okay, clearly they know that it's going somewhere that by episode 6, it'll all make a lot more sense. And there are a lot of really glowing reviews from people who have seen all 6. So I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt for like kind of a weird epilogue/prologue point of entry that might not have been, like, to me, the strongest pilot hook.
Yeah, so with that in mind, we are going to dive into a couple of big talking points to come out of this. But I think what's most interesting to me is how this is a sequel to Watchmen, which is a comic book, a graphic novel that if you ask your average comic book reader, they'll say this is the best comic book ever made. Ever, right? And they think it's perfect as it is. I'm actually of this. I'm an avid comic book reader, and I also agree that Watchmen is probably the best thing out there overall. And the fact that you're coming up with a sequel to something that's perfect as it is, it feels wrong, right? Even when DC Comics made some before Watchmen comics and then did the Doomsday Clock comic, which is still coming out now, people were up in arms of how could you do this? So now HBO's getting in on it, right? And this isn't an adaptation of any of those comics. This is an original story by showrunner David Lindelof. So the question I have for you guys is, how does this Watchmen show feel as a sequel to the Watchmen graphic novel?
I love that Damon said that he thinks Alan Moore cursed him for making it.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think because Alan Moore's never given anything that's come after the graphic novel his blessing, there's always just the stigma. It's we shouldn't touch this. But the fact that a creative guy like Damon Lindelof is coming in, who is so imaginative, and he's putting his own spin on it, and it's set so far after the graphic novel takes place that it feels like a completely different world, but yet still harkens back and has some callbacks to those characters that we know and love. So I still feel like I'm in the Watchmen, but I'm not in the Watchmen that the graphic novels. I'm in Tulsa right now, which is a different part of the country, all that kind of things that go with it. So it's a whole unique world, but it still feels like the Watchmen.
See, I kind of had a different, take the first time I saw it, because we, David and I are members of the TV Critics Association, and by virtue of that, back in August, we actually got to see a rough cut of the episode and then talk to Damon Lindelof afterwards. And then I've since gone back and rewatched this finished version that aired Sunday. And the first time I watched it, I was like, why is this the Watchmen sequel you wanted to tell? Thematically, it's tackling such different topics than what Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were touching on in the 80s. It's 30 years later, but 30 years set in this alternate history where all this stuff has happened, including a giant squid monster coming through New York City and destroying the world and being a fake alien invasion. So much of what this first episode touches on is history that we, by virtue of this being an alternate reality, aren't privy to. The second time I picked up on a lot more of it, and I think it's all going to layer going forward. But the thing that really helped me kind of understand what Damon Lindelof was trying to accomplish here was, he said that he read a piece by Ta-Nehisi Coates, an Atlantic writer and Black Panther comics writer now, that he published in the Atlantic back in 2014. That's called "The Case for Reparations," and it was all about the Black Wall Street massacre, the Tulsa massacre. That's like the real world setting that kind of kicks off this season and sets them on the path in Tulsa. And that he was really drew inspiration from that, and also his shame of like not really being aware of that, because it's not something that is really widely taught in schools. It's kind of a shameful part of American history, and that he drew on that as the backdrop of like, what are the relevant things happening in our socio-political conversation: white supremacy, racism, police brutality, like all these different elements, and then remix them within the world of Watchmen in a way that he felt was what Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were trying to accomplish with like relevant topics back in the 80s. So I was like, okay, I get that. But I still feel like this episode was such a blend of like unfamiliar with callbacks to the comics that it didn't fully land for me as well. And I think I just need to give it the benefit of the doubt and like go along for the ride and see how everything layers from here.
Well, I think that's what I was saying earlier about Damon Lindelof, is that I'm maybe more a fan of his than I am even The Watchmen. I think it's just because of The Leftovers, and because you kind of had to go on a ride with The Leftovers for a few seasons, especially after the first season, which is like, what the heck is this show about, to kind of get to the point of it, which I do think is a little unfair because this is TV, right? You can't say,
it's not even bingeable.
It's not even bingeable. You're right. It's like, oh, it's not like an 8-hour movie or a 10-hour movie. It's like, each episode has to stand on its own. So I get Terry's point there. It's like this episode does leave you kind of wanting more and wanting to know more about the story. But I do trust Lindelof after Leftovers. He has my trust. So that's why I'm kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, actually, the one scene that actually hooked me and really got me in was because I wasn't sure how to feel about this, because I am one of those people of like, this better be good if it's going to be a sequel to Watchmen. Is the scene where it started raining squids, because that was cut out of the Zack Snyder movie. Zack Snyder changed the ending. It wasn't cut out. It was never filmed. But the fact that they acknowledged that happened, and this is like a weird side effect that now happens in this world, was the big signal to me that, oh, this is a direct sequel to the comic book. And that suddenly made it more interesting to me that we were going to play in that specific version of the Watchmen world. So I do think that as a sequel, I think it's very well equipped to follow on in the spirit of Watchmen, although I don't think it is a traditional sequel as we imagine of like, let's pick back up with those characters. Right. It's more like, as David said, it's like, it's a different part of the country, completely different characters. There are some connections, some more overt than others, but it's not trying to be a direct follow-up to what happened. And I think that would actually be like a bad idea, to just directly follow up right after the events of the last movie. I really do think it's really interesting to take the tact of the original Watchmen creators and apply it to modern day society, because that's what Watchmen should be. And Watchmen should honestly be uncomfortable. Right? Because it's holding up like a mirror to society and to show it how ugly it is. And boy, to be honest, I'm actually in the same boat as Lindelof. I actually did not know that the Tulsa race riots was a real thing that happened. I thought, oh, this is a fictitious thing. And then Terry, you were educating me on it. and then I did a lot of research online. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know about this. But it really does color the show and start it off on a very profound note.
Yeah, and I think this episode is definitely uncomfortable, and it's supposed to. Like, I think I went in and it just so wasn't what I expected the first time I watched it. And when I watched it the second time, I did like it more, and I understood more of what was trying to be accomplished. But it is uncomfortable, and it's so charged too. And and I don't think we get an answer in this episode. But I'm like, Damon Lindelof, what are you trying to say? Like the way that they're remixing, the way that the 7th Cavalry has appropriated Rorschach's manifesto and even his mask to be like the new face of white supremacy. And Damon Lindelof has had this great quote where he's like, he did that in a way where Rorschach isn't around to say, hey, I wasn't a white supremacist. That wasn't what I was trying to say, but that society has kind of turned it into something else. I think that's really interesting, and those kind of like indirect sequel elements are, I think, the things that hooked me the most. The squids was such a cool scene as well, and like the way that people reacted to it. And then also like my favorite scene, just for pure WTF-ness, was like the Ozymandias scene with Jeremy Irons, where like HBO won't even they still aren't even saying that his character's name is like Lord of the Manor or something like that. They won't actually acknowledge that he's on Ozymandias, but like obviously he is, but it's like, what is happening here? And he has a squid anniversary cake, and like, what's happening? And like in the same way that we were kind of talking about, like, what was the hook of Watchmen at the beginning? And it was this mystery, this conspiracy theory about like who killed the comedian. What a compelling like first, issue to kind of have you on board for the rest of it, and then where things go from there. There's no hook in that same way here. There's obviously like the death at the end, and like why is this man in the wheelchair, who presumably is the kid at the beginning, doing this, and like, is there a conspiracy happening with the police? Like, to me, that's a mystery as much as like what are the blanks in between where we left off and what got us here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did want to talk about how the use of police authority and masked figures in this world, because in the original Watchmen, I'm sure everyone will remember, like, the Minutemen were banned, like masks were banned and by the police. But in this world, the police work with masked characters, and some of the police do seem to have masked personas as well. But that's slightly different from police who just wear the yellow mask just to hide their identity. And so the main character, Regina King, who I think it's safe to say she's the main character, right?
She's on the poster.
Yeah, she is Sister Knight, and is on the police force, but has a vigilante persona where she's like a masked, costumed, like fully fledged, like superhero, really. Although, of course, superheroes in this world don't have powers unless your name is Dr. Manhattan, really.
It's just hanging out on Mars.
Well,
Yeah.
my take on that was that the police officers that had the yellow masks were just, the regular police officers, and then Regina King and Looking Glass are detectives. And like detectives, like, like detectives like Bosch would wear a suit or a blazer or something, and they wear a more elaborate outfit than a regular cop because they're detectives, because she still has a badge. But I think she's a detective. I think that's
Right.
I can't prove that, but I'm just that's just my guess.
Why do you
my
think
theory.
the police chief didn't need a mask? That just
True.
everyone
Yeah, he
knows,
was just
right?
out there. That's right.
It's like the only
Yeah.
one. Though obviously it didn't work out for him too well by the end of the episode.
Sure didn't. But no, I do think it's fascinating of how, like, and I think it's the benefit of jumping like decades ahead of past the last Watchmen story, is that you have to question of what is the role of masked figures in this world.
Well, it's interesting. There's like this seminal event in their alternate history called the White Night that's touched on a bit here, but that was like a time where, because all the 7th Cavalry knew the faces of the police, they were actually able to go and find them in their homes and knew who they were and attack them, and that happened to Regina King's character. And so like the fact that they would be forced to so subvert their idea of like whether vigilantes should be allowed to wear masks, and that now is like the entire structure of their police force, I think is a really, really interesting twist that, again, is like a more subtle connection back to the comic.
I think that's one of the things that there's another scene I just really loved was Looking Glass's interrogation scene. I just love
the music is so good.
His mask is very captivating. It's that just silver, metallic look, and it's just reflecting everything in the screens that's going on around him. Like, it's just a very like startling mask. Like, it's just, there's no flare. It's just it's covering. It's just crazy. It's like a sheet of silver or something. Yeah.
I really like that because it's almost like Rorschach's mask 2.0. Not that it's like the next version,
Right.
but it's like a mask that literally like reflects. Like, whereas like in the Rorschach mask, it's what the person sees in the mask is like, it's up to them. This is like a literal mirror. I thought just the use of kind of like metaphor and like psychological, warfare with your mask was really, really cool. So Terry, you brought up Ozymandias earlier, but I did want to dig a little more into that of what the heck is going on there, because he is like, I think, the most central figure to the first story that is now in this sequel series, at least as far as the pilot goes. And it feels like, he's kind of just decided to live off by himself in this mansion with some robot servants or something like that. And it's what the kind of like status quo for him that I see is that he saved the world with a supervillain plan, but he's not allowed to be a public figure because everyone knows he did it, because Rorschach's journal was published and the secret came out. So he's the savior of the world, and I'm using air quotes here, yet he's not able to like walk amongst the public and enjoy that.
So it's interesting that you watched it and thought like he chose to be here. I kind of felt like he has to be here. Like maybe Dr. Manhattan was like, now like this is kind of your penance for everything you did, because weirdly, like, yes, the squids are there, but it almost feels like the 7th Cavalry are the only ones kind of acknowledging that it was like a hoax and fake, and like I don't know, did people believe Rorschach's journal when he published it, or was it like just viewed as, I don't know, just like a theory, like people saying that like the moon landing was faked or something like that. So that I feel like we didn't get answers to here of like actually how people responded to all of this. Obviously, it was good enough for Redford to be president like since Nixon was out of office or whatever would have happened. But yeah, I kind of read it as like Ozymandias was held there. And
okay,
that
he's
could be
under house
completely
arrest.
wrong. Yeah, because it seems like the people, like his servants, are like robots, maybe, or like there's like something weird about them too. I don't know. I was like very intrigued by that scene, even though like what is actually going on and how does that connect to anything other than the fact that it's Ozymandias. But yeah, I don't know. I had a different read.
Yeah, I think I agree with Terry. I like that theory. I think maybe he is because we do see Dr. Manhattan, at least on a news clip or something like that. He's still in Mars building structures and bringing them down or whatever he's doing up there. And yeah, maybe he does still have an eye on everything. And if these are crazy robot, mind-controlled people, whatever, that are his servants, maybe he built them or created them somehow to watch over him. So he has eyes on him, even from way up in Mars.
Yeah, I realize like I'm getting more and more excited the more I talk about it, and I started off kind of like muted in my thoughts about it. I'm like just so
Are you sure you didn't just kind of like this?
Well, that
Terry?
theory was pretty cool. I was like,
did
I didn't think about
but
that.
I'm like, I felt like the delivery in this episode wasn't as intriguing as like the concepts that are there, but like. Also, there's American Hero Story, which is totally like a riff off like American Horror Story, American Crime Story, that you keep seeing banner ads for like it's going to be about the Minutemen. And I'm so intrigued to find out like what that is throughout the whole episode. There's like a blimp for it, and then there's like a commercial ad for it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait until we get to the American Hero Story like episode where we find out like what is the tale of the Minutemen, that the slightly fictionalized version of it that they'll be telling like 30 years later, or I don't even, what was it, like, I guess like 40 or 50 years later, if you go back to when the Minutemen were.
Math isn't my strong suit.
Yeah, math.
In the Watchmen pilot, there are a ton of really cool Easter eggs. What were some ones that you guys really liked?
Okay, the squids, obviously. The squids are great. Does Ozymandias count as an Easter egg? Considering
Sure, he's a
just
big
character?
old walkie-talking Easter egg with lots of screen time.
A more subtle one I liked was how Regina King's character said that she was originally from Vietnam and then moved to the States when it became one of the United States. And I thought that was a nice callback to the fact that like the backdrop of the Watchmen comics is that in this alternate universe, the U.S. had won the Vietnam War.
I think for me, it was probably Dr. Manhattan, like the parade and everything. And just I'm so curious about his character because he's basically the most powerful being that we know of.
The news footage,
he's on Mars doing his thing up there. So it's like, I want to know, where is he? Like, what's his state of mind right now? And if he comes back, which look at the trailers, it seems like he will come back. It's like, what does that mean for everybody else? What does that mean for Regina King's character and her story? So I'm very curious about him.
And then of course there's the owl ship too.
The owl ship. That's true.
Not the
but
owl ship.
They wrecked it. They crashed.
Well, so we have an interview up with Damon Lindelof on IGN, kind of going through some of those Easter eggs as well. And I guess what he said is that a big theme for him of the Watchmen comic was appropriation, and so that the owl ships now are just like common like police vehicles that they use, and it's not like this is Archie. It's just like an owl ship.
So there's more out there. Then we're okay. Yeah. We're going to see more.
They'll hopefully have another one. It seemed like they didn't really know how to fly it too well.
But yeah, they did say that Archie, like the owl ship, like night owls. Actually, it's the second night owl's night ship, owl ship that would. It sounded like it might make an appearance, although the character is currently not slated to. But you never know.
Yeah,
could be a secret surprise.
What were your favorites?
I really just love the squids, which and I think a lot of people might be coming to this having only seen the Zack Snyder movie where there was no squid. But at the end, when Dr. Manhattan was blamed on that detonation that destroyed New York, in the comic, Ozymandias had created this fake intergalactic squid monster. Like they grew a squid monster, transported it to the middle of New York City, that had it explode to make people think aliens had invaded, and so all world powers would then broker a peace so they could ally against this interstellar threat. But of course, none of it was real. But it's just so funny to me that as some weird, strange side effect of this, now it occasionally just rains squids, and nobody cares. It's like an annoyance. Like they get out and you wipe them off your windshield, and then you just move on with your day.
Yeah, you were talking about before this about how like there were like hurricane parties in Florida where you were from, and like in California, it's like, oh, check Twitter. Oh, there was an earthquake. Like that kind of like something that would be so horrifying would just be more an annoyance or a nuisance, is how Damon Lindelof kind of described it.
Yeah, that's the world they live in. It's not quite unlike ours.
I also do love the use of the Rorschach masks and kind of the misappropriation of that. And then of course we have to note like the blood drop on the police badge, the very last shot of the episode, a key callback to the comedian's death and the doomsday clock being 1 hour till midnight and the smiling. But you guys know the imagery that I'm just...
Yeah, we could go on, but those were the coolest ones. But yeah, if you guys spotted any other cool ones, let us know in the comments. And hey, thank you for watching this episode of What to Watch. Let us know your thoughts on HBO's Watchmen in the comments. But we have more What to Watch episodes for you to watch. Maybe you saw The Joker and were very confused. So were we. So we ran through our top theories on what the ending means. And also, we have another theory, even though this is not slated to happen, on how the Joker movie could possibly connect to the Robert Pattinson Batman movie being directed by Matt Reeves. Check that out and be sure to follow and subscribe to IGN.